All right, shalom, shalom, and shalom. This is your Akazaki Yahoo. As always, I'm giving all praises, honor, and great esteem unto the Most High Power, Yahweh, Bashem, Hamashiach, Wamalak, Yahweh Shai, and to the 12 tribes of Israel who are scattered to the four quarters of the earth. I say shalom, wa, baruchim, that is peace and blessings. And I cannot wait till the day when the Most High brings us back together and we are once again 12 tribes, one family, one nation, under the Most High Power, under one covenant, back in our own land with a heart of flesh and no more a heart of stone, with our enemies and our adversaries and all those who hate us under our feet. All praises to the Almighty Yah. Hallelujah. Yes, indeed, we are back with another video review. And this video comes to us by Black History Stories. All right. This first video is a double header, by the way. This first video is called 10 Untold Black History Facts That Will Leave You Speechless. And the second video is called A City, a Lost City, the Lost City of Black Wall Street, a story the world forgot. All right. So let's get to it and get through it. All praises to the Most High, as always. And thank you for your time and checking out the video. Hope you enjoy.
Have you ever wondered what secrets lie buried in the pages of history? What if I told you that some of the most incredible achievements that shaped our world were accomplished by Black individuals whose stories were deliberately erased or forgotten? Today, we're uncovering 10 mind-blowing facts that will completely change how you see history. Trust me, by the end of this story, you'll be questioning everything you thought you knew. While Thomas Edison gets all the credit, the truth is far more complex. Lewis Latimer, a brilliant Black inventor, didn't just improve Edison's design, he made it practical. Edison's early bulbs burned out in hours, but Latimer invented the carbon filament that made light bulbs last for months. Without him, we might still be sitting in the dark. But here's the kicker. Latimer also drafted the patents for Alexander Graham Bell's telephone. One man, two world-changing inventions, yet most people have never heard his name. Before we dive deeper into the history, kindly like, comment, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories. During World War II, there was a top-secret unit so effective that Nazi Germany put a bounty on their heads. The Tuskegee Airmen? No, this is about the 761st Tank Battalion, known as the Black Panthers. These soldiers broke through German lines that had held for months, liberated concentration camps, and fought for 183 straight days in combat. General George Patton himself called them one of his finest units. Yet their story was classified for decades because the military didn't want to admit that Black soldiers had been crucial to victory. Hidden in the basement of NASA, away from the white mathematicians upstairs, worked a woman whose calculations were so precise that astronauts refused to launch without her approval. Katherine Johnson didn't just calculate trajectories, she literally computed the path to the moon by hand. When NASA got its first computers, John Glenn demanded that Katherine double-check the machine's work before his historic orbit. If she says they're good, Glenn said, then I'm ready to go. One woman's mind was considered more reliable than the most advanced computers of her time. Forget Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk. The wealthiest person who ever lived was Mansa Musa, ruler of the Mali Empire in the 14th century. His wealth was so incomprehensible that when he made a pilgrimage to Mecca, he gave away so much gold in Cairo that he crashed the Egyptian economy for 10 years. We're talking about a man whose casual generosity destabilized an entire region's financial system. His kingdom controlled the world's gold and salt trade, making him worth an estimated $400 billion in today's money. Dr. Charles Drew revolutionized medicine in ways that still save lives today. He discovered how to process and store blood plasma, creating the world's first blood banks. During World War II, his techniques saved thousands of soldiers' lives. But here's the tragic irony. When Dr. Drew was critically injured in a car accident, he was refused treatment at a whites-only hospital and died from his injuries. The man who gave the world the gift of life-saving blood transfusions died because of the color of his skin. When you think of groundbreaking heart surgery, you probably picture a famous white surgeon in a prestigious hospital. But the first successful open-heart surgery was performed by Dr. Daniel Hale Williams in 1893, without X-rays, antibiotics, or modern equipment. Using only his skill and determination, he opened a man's chest and sutured his heart, saving his life. This was considered impossible at the time, Yet Dr. Williams did it decades before it became standard practice. Every time you stop at a red light, you're benefiting from the genius of Garrett Morgan. After witnessing a horrible accident between a car and a horse-drawn carriage, Morgan invented the three-position traffic signal, the precursor to modern traffic lights. But that's not all. He also invented the gas mask that saved countless lives in World War I and industrial accidents. One man's inventions made both driving and breathing safer for millions. The legendary Lone Ranger character was actually based on Bass Reeves, a black U.S. Marshal in the Old West. Reeves was a master of disguise, a crack shot, and arrested over 3,000 criminals during his 32-year career. He never killed an innocent person and was so respected that outlaws would surrender rather than face him. The man who inspired America's most famous fictional lawman was a freed slave who became a legend in his own right. Matthew Henson was the first person to actually set foot on the North Pole, not Robert Peary, who gets the credit. As Peary's navigator and translator, Henson could speak Inuit and was beloved by the indigenous people who guided their expeditions. When they finally reached the pole in 1909, Henson planted the American flag while Peary was still struggling across the ice behind him. Yet history books barely mention his name, giving all the glory to the man who arrived second. You've heard of Einstein and Oppenheimer, but what about J. Ernest Wilkins Jr.? At age 13, he entered the University of Chicago. By 19, he had a PhD in mathematics. During the Manhattan Project, his work on radiation shielding was crucial to the development of nuclear reactors. His calculations determined how much radiation could penetrate different materials, knowledge that was essential for both nuclear weapons and peaceful nuclear energy. Without his work, the atomic age might never have begun. But here's where our story takes an incredible turn. These 10 facts are just the beginning. What I'm about to reveal in part 2 will show you that there's an even deeper layer to this story, connections between these individuals that historians have never fully explored, and a pattern of systematic erasure that goes far beyond simple oversight. The most shocking revelation? 3 of these historical figures were secretly connected through a network that influenced major world events, and their collaboration was hidden for over a century. The evidence was discovered in recently declassified documents that reveal. Well, hold on to your seats because what I'm about to reveal will rewrite everything you think you know about how history really works. In 2019, researchers at the Smithsonian discovered a cache of letters hidden in the walls of a building being demolished in Washington, D.C. These weren't just any letters. They revealed a secret correspondence between Lewis Latimer, Dr. Charles Drew, and Garrett Morgan that spanned decades. But how was this possible when they lived in different time periods? The answer lies in a mentorship network that was deliberately hidden from history. Lewis Latimer didn't just invent the carbon filament. He established a secret society of black inventors and intellectuals called the Builders. This organization operated in the shadows, passing knowledge, funding, and resources between generations of black innovators. When Latimer was elderly, he personally mentored a young Garrett Morgan. Later, Morgan used the same network to support Dr. Charles Drew's medical research. They weren't working alone. They were part of a centuries-long chain of hidden brilliance. Here's what will really shock you. The erasure of black contributions wasn't accidental. Declassified FBI documents from the 1950s reveal Operation Clean Slate, a deliberate government program to minimize black achievements in history textbooks and public records. The goal was to prevent what they called inspirational momentum among black communities during the civil rights era. The documents show that patent offices were instructed to list white supervisors as primary inventors, newspapers were given suggested edits to stories about black achievements, and schools were provided with corrected history books that removed or minimized black contributions. This wasn't just prejudice, it was a coordinated campaign to steal credit and hide the truth. But it gets worse. The same network that tried to erase American black history had international connections. When Mansa Musa's empire fell, European colonizers didn't just take the gold, they took the libraries. Thousands of manuscripts documenting African scientific, mathematical, and philosophical achievements were shipped to European universities where they were locked away or had their authorship changed. Recent archaeological work in Mali has uncovered evidence that Mansa Musa's scholars had calculated the circumference of the Earth accurately, developed advanced surgical techniques, and created mathematical formulas that wouldn't be discovered in Europe for another 200 years. The University of Timbuktu had over 700,000 manuscripts, more than existed in all of Europe at the time. Yet somehow this became the dark continent in European history books. Even today, the suppression continues in subtle ways. Bass Reeves' descendants fought for decades to get his story told. only to have movie studios consistently reimagine his story with white actors. When a historically accurate Base Reeves film was finally proposed, funding mysteriously dried up, and the project was shelved indefinitely. Matthew Henson's diary, which contains detailed accounts of his Arctic expeditions and proof of his priority in reaching the North Pole, disappeared from the National Archives in 1967. It resurfaced at a private auction in 2018, where an anonymous buyer paid $2.3 million for it, then immediately donated it to a private collection that's not open to researchers. Recent genetic analysis has revealed something extraordinary. Katherine Johnson's mathematical abilities weren't just exceptional, they were inherited. Genealogical research has traced her family line back to scholars in the ancient kingdom of Kush, known for their astronomical calculations. Her ancestors helped build the pyramids of Meroe using mathematical principles that were supposedly unknown in Africa. Even more incredible, DNA analysis shows that several of the figures we've discussed were distant relatives, connected through a bloodline of scholars and inventors that stretches back over 1,000 years. This wasn't a coincidence. It was a hereditary genius that survived slavery, colonization, and systematic oppression. Here's why this matters today. Those lost African manuscripts? They contain solutions to problems we're still struggling with. Agricultural techniques that could solve world hunger, architectural principles that could create earthquake-proof buildings, and medical treatments that could cure diseases. But this knowledge remains locked away in private collections and classified archives. 3 major pharmaceutical companies currently hold patents on medicines that were originally documented in those hidden African manuscripts. They're making billions from traditional African knowledge while the continent remains impoverished. It's the ultimate theft, stealing not just credit but profits from ancestral wisdom. J. Ernest Wilkins Jr.'s nuclear calculations weren't just used for weapons. He'd secretly developed plans for clean, safe nuclear energy that could have prevented every nuclear accident in history. His designs were classified and buried because they would have made existing power plants obsolete and cost certain corporations trillions in investments. Recently leaked documents show that his clean reactor design was tested in secret and worked perfectly. But rather than revolutionize energy production, the technology was locked away. Today's climate crisis could have been prevented if Wilkins' work had been implemented decades ago. Everything we've uncovered leads to one inescapable conclusion. Black excellence didn't disappear from history by accident. It was systematically erased, stolen, and hidden by people who knew that acknowledging the truth would fundamentally change how the world sees intelligence, creativity, and human potential. The most mind-blowing part? This is still happening. Right now, there are Black innovators whose work is being suppressed, whose patents are being stolen, whose discoveries are being credited to others. The same patterns that erased Lewis Latimer's contributions are still operating today, just more subtly. But here's the hope. Every time someone shares these stories, every time the truth spreads, we weaken their ability to hide it. The internet has made it harder to bury the truth forever. These hidden giants of history are finally getting their recognition, and their descendants are continuing their legacy of brilliance. The next time someone tells you that certain groups are naturally more intelligent or innovative, you'll know the truth. Excellence has always existed everywhere. It's just that some people's contributions were stolen and hidden while others were amplified and celebrated. These 10 facts are just the beginning. There are hundreds more stories waiting to be uncovered, thousands more heroes whose names should be known, countless more achievements that were erased from history. But now you know the pattern. Now you can see through the lies. The real question is, what are you going to do with this knowledge? Don't forget to comment your thoughts and where you're watching from, like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories.
All right, man. Good stuff. Right off the bat, you know, he begins with a lot of lies that we've been learning about, that we've understood, that have been told to us, that they've been lying to us, and that they would stop at nothing to discredit the so-called Black man, the so-called Negro, the children of Israel. That's who we really are. Uh, Now, it's interesting that he said that, that the woman had a line to Cush. That's interesting. Cush is not Israel, not Yasha'al, not Yasha'Allah. Cush is Hamitic people. And the pyramids that he mentioned were interesting as well, because we built those cities in Mizraim, or Egypt. The children of Israel did that under harsh bondage. That's why the Most High came to save us. uh, sent came to Moshe to bring us out of that harsh bondage because we were under great duress during that time frame. So, but interesting, still interesting stuff. Uh, a lot to be thought about and a lot to be considered. That network was very, very, very interesting. But we're going to continue into the second video and slacking. And this is the lost city of Black Wall Street, a story the world forgot. All right, let's go.
The air in Greenwood, Tulsa, tasted of hot asphalt and the sweet, dizzying scent of honeysuckle. It was the summer of 1921, and for Samuel Hayes, the smell was a lie. It masked the stink of oppression that clung to every brick, every polished pane of glass in the prosperous district. From his perch on a wobbly stool outside the majestic Mount Zion Baptist Church, where he was meant to be polishing shoes, Samuel watched the world of Black Wall Street turn, a world he was a part of, yet felt so far from. Samuel, at 17, was a quiet boy with eyes that saw more than they should have. His hands, calloused and strong for his age, were a testament to the life he'd lived. A life of hard work that never seemed to lead to prosperity. He was a son of Greenwood, but he was also the boy who worked for Jeremiah Vance, the richest man in the district. Vance, a towering man with a laugh that boomed like a cannon and a stare that could make a grown man tremble, owned half of Greenwood. He was a man of immense power, but he treated Samuel with the same contempt he reserved for the dirt on his immaculate shoes. Jeremiah Vance saw in Samuel not the promise of youth, but a reflection of his own forgotten past. He had risen from nothing, and in his cruel, distorted logic, he believed that to elevate a young man like Samuel was to spoil him. Vance's mentorship was a form of prolonged torment, a slow-burning humiliation disguised as guidance. Boy. Vance's voice, a whip crack against the summer air, pulled Samuel from his thoughts. Did you hear me? I need those boots spotless for the afternoon sermon. Don't think for a second that my time is worthless. Samuel's head snapped up. Yes, sir, Mr. Vance. Right away, sir. He bent his head, scrubbing with a fury that had nothing to do with the dirt on Vance's shoes. With each stroke he replayed the taunts, the condescending smirks, the casual dismissals. But a memory warm and precious pushed through the bitter fog. It was the memory of his father, a man who had not survived the harshness of the world but had left him a promise. A promise not of wealth but of an idea. A secret, his father had called it, to building a legacy that could never be taken away. That secret, a cryptic note scrawled on a yellowed piece of paper, lay hidden beneath a loose floorboard in Samuel's meager room. He had no idea what it meant, but he held on to it like a lifeline. It was his father's last word to him, and it was a beacon in his darkest moments. One scorching afternoon, Vance approached Samuel, his face a mask of feigned concern. Boy, I see you still struggle. This work, it's not enough for you, is it? Samuel froze, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. I do my best, sir. Vance's booming laugh filled the street, drawing the attention of passers-by. Your best is an insult to the word, boy. You think you have what it takes to be like me? To build an empire? You're a shoeblack, Samuel. Nothing more. The words, though not new, felt like a physical blow. Samuel's hand, holding the rag, trembled. He was not just an employee to Vance. He was a walking, breathing lesson in inferiority. The dramatic irony was palpable to Samuel. He saw Vance's insecurity, his need to crush anyone who reminded him of his own humble beginnings. But what truly twisted the knife was the fact that Vance had, unknowingly, given Samuel the very thing he sought, the secret to true legacy. That evening, as the sun bled into the sky, painting the clouds in shades of crimson and gold, Samuel knelt in his small room. He pulled the loose floorboard, his hands shaking with a mix of fear and excitement. The note was just as he remembered it, the ink faded, the paper brittle. The foundation is not in the brick, but in the story. Find the story, and the city will rise again. Samuel read the words over and over, his brow furrowed in confusion. Story? What story? What did it have to do with building a legacy? It was maddeningly cryptic. The promise, once a beacon, now felt like a cruel puzzle. But as he turned the paper over, a faint, almost invisible map appeared. It was a crude drawing of the district, with certain buildings marked with an X. The first X was over the very church he worked in front of. A shiver of excitement ran through him. Could this be it? Could this be the key to his father's legacy, the very thing that would allow him to prove Vance wrong? The next day, Samuel was a different boy. His movements were more deliberate, his gaze more focused. He spent the day observing, not just working. He listened to the stories of the old-timers, the ones who had built Greenwood with their bare hands. He heard tales of resilience, of community, of a promise made to build a city that could stand on its own. Over the next few weeks, Samuel began his secret quest. He visited each location marked on the map, and at each spot he found an elder, a storyteller, a keeper of memory. He listened to them talk about the history of the buildings, the people who had built them, and the struggles they had overcome. The tailor who had saved every penny to buy his shop, the grocer who had fed a whole family through the lean years, the doctor who had risked his life to heal the sick. These were not just stories, they were foundations built not of brick and mortar but of courage and resilience. He began to see the truth of his father's cryptic message. The legacy was not in the buildings themselves, but in the collective memory, the shared history of the people who had built them. The stories were the mortar, the dreams the foundation. He also began to see the true nature of Jeremiah Vance. Vance's wealth was built on a different foundation, one of ambition and fear. He had forgotten the stories, the struggles, the very heart of the community that had built him up. It was a legacy of power, not of community. One morning, as Samuel was sweeping the steps of Vance's office, he heard a commotion inside. A group of men, white and armed, was gathered around Vance's desk. Their voices were low, but their words cut through the air like daggers. "You have a day, Vance. Get your business in order. We're tearing this place down." Vance's face was ashen. He was a man used to being in control, and now he was a captive in his own city. The men spoke of eminent domain, of a new highway that would improve the city, but their contemptuous glances at the black businesses told a different story. They wanted to dismantle Black Wall Street, to bury its legacy under a slab of concrete. Samuel, unnoticed in his cleaning, felt his stomach drop. This was not just a threat to Vance. It was a threat to every person, every business, and every story he had spent weeks collecting. The next day the air was thick with tension. News of the threat had spread like wildfire. Businesses were closing their doors, people were boarding up windows, and a palpable sense of fear hung over Greenwood. Jeremiah Vance, for the first time in Samuel's memory, looked defeated. He stood on the steps of his office, his hands trembling. He had money, but it was useless against this kind of power. He had power, but it was only within the walls of Greenwood. Samuel, his heart pounding with a newfound purpose, walked up to Vance. "Sir, I have something that might help." Vance scoffed, his face a mask of despair and rage. "What do you have, boy? A polished shoe? That won't save us." "No, sir," Samuel said, his voice surprisingly steady. "I have the stories. The foundation of this city." He pulled out the crudely drawn map, the one his father had left him, and a small notebook filled with the histories he had gathered. He laid them at Vance's feet. Vance looked at the boy, and for the first time he saw him not as a shoe black but as a person. He saw the fire in his eyes, the conviction in his stance. He picked up the notebook, his hands still shaking. He began to read, and as he did, his face underwent a dramatic shift. A flicker of hope replaced the defeat in his eyes. Samuel had not just collected stories. He had connected them, woven them into a tapestry of resilience, of a community that had faced insurmountable odds and had always prevailed. Vance looked up, a single tear tracing a path down his cheek. "They want to bury the city," he said, his voice a low rumble. "But they can't bury the stories." A plan began to form in Vance's mind, a plan born not of his own ambition, but of the strength he saw reflected in the boy before him. They would not fight with money or power, they would fight with history, with the very soul of the city. The next morning, as the white men approached with their demolition equipment, they were met not with violence but with a silent, powerful protest. Standing in a line in front of every building were the elders, the storytellers, the people Samuel had spoken with. Each one held a sign, a single word written in bold black ink. "We are the foundation." The words hung in the air, a challenge, a testament. The men faltered, their faces a mix of confusion and frustration. This was not the fight they had anticipated. They had expected resistance, not a display of collective history. Vance, standing beside Samuel, looked at the line of people, his face a mix of pride and humility. He had spent his life building a legacy of power, but it was Samuel, the boy he had so cruelly mistreated, who had given him a legacy that mattered. As the standoff continued, a tense silence fell over the street. The power had shifted, not from one hand to another, but from one philosophy to another. And just as the white men's leader, a man named Henderson, was about to give the command, a sound echoed from the end of the street. It was the sound of a camera shutter and then another and another. A group of reporters, drawn by the unusual silence, were documenting the scene. Henderson's eyes widened in panic. They couldn't tear down a city while the whole world was watching. He had to retreat at least for now. But as he looked at Vance, a sneer returned to his face. "This isn't over, Vance," he spat. Vance simply smiled, a genuine, humble smile. "I know," he said, "but you're a little late. The city is already gone. And the world is about to find out where it went." The tension broke, but the suspense remained. They had won this battle, but the war was far from over. And as the crowd dispersed, Samuel, clutching the precious notebook to his chest, saw a woman, a stranger, standing on the corner. She met his gaze, and with a slow, deliberate movement, she raised her own camera, her lens aimed not at the crowd, but directly at Samuel. A cold dread, a feeling of being watched, settled over him. Who was she? And what was her story? Was she a friend or foe in this ongoing war for Greenwood's soul? The woman on the corner, her face a serene mask, lowered her camera and slipped into the crowd, a ghost in the vibrant chaos of Greenwood. Samuel, his heart still thumping from the confrontation, felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. The woman was not like the other reporters. There was a purpose in her gaze, a sharp intelligence that made him uneasy. He saw Jeremiah Vance looking at him, a silent question in his eyes. For the first time their roles had reversed. Vance, the once unapproachable magnate, was now looking to the young shoeblack for guidance. "Who was that?" Vance asked, his voice low. Samuel shook his head. "I don't know, sir. But she wasn't here to report on the standoff." Vance's expression hardened. "They're not just trying to take our land, Samuel. They're trying to steal our narrative. They want to bury our history so deep no one will ever find it again." The next week was a blur of activity. The media attention had bought them time, but not a solution. The white men, led by the ruthless Henderson, were now using legal channels, filing lawsuits and citing old, obscure laws to justify their actions. They were using a new weapon, paperwork. But Samuel and Vance were prepared. They had something more powerful than legal documents. They had a living history, a collective memory. Vance, using his influence and connections, began to organize the community, and for the first time he did so not as a master but as a peer. Samuel, with his notebook full of stories, became the historian, the chronicler of Greenwood's soul. He went from door to door, sharing the tales he had collected, weaving them into a powerful narrative of resilience. He spoke of the time a fire almost consumed the tailor shop and how the entire community had rallied to rebuild it in a single day. He spoke of the grocer, Mr. Johnson, who had mortgaged his own home to ensure every family had food during a harsh winter. These were not just stories, they were a collective identity. The dramatic irony was not lost on Samuel. Vance, a man who had once belittled him for his lack of ambition, was now at his mercy, depending on him to save the very empire he had so ruthlessly built. It was a humbling experience for Vance, a lesson in the true nature of power. Power was not in control but in connection. One afternoon, as Samuel was leaving Mr. Johnson's grocery, he saw the woman again. She was standing across the street, a book tucked under her arm. He approached her cautiously. "I saw you the other day," Samuel said, his voice a little shaky. "You were taking pictures. What do you want?" The woman smiled, a slow, kind smile that reached her eyes. "My name is Eleanor. I'm a journalist from New York, and I'm here to write the truth." Eleanor explained that she had heard about the legal battle over Greenwood and was fascinated by the story. She had been following the case from a distance, and what she had seen convinced her that there was more to this story than a simple land dispute. She saw a community fighting for its very existence, using a weapon more powerful than money or force: their history. "Your story," she said, looking directly at Samuel, "is the most powerful one. You are the keeper of the city's soul. What you have in that notebook is worth more than all of Vance's businesses combined." Eleanor wasn't a spy for the white men. She was an ally, a professional storyteller who understood the power of a narrative. With her help, the story of Greenwood began to spread beyond Tulsa. Articles appeared in national newspapers, and the pressure on Henderson and his men began to mount. The final standoff came in a courtroom, not on the streets. Henderson, sleek and confident in his suit, presented his legal case, arguing that Greenwood was an economic blight on the city and that its removal was for the public good. He had no idea what he was up against. Vance, who had been practicing with Samuel, stood before the judge. He didn't talk about property lines or legal precedents. He talked about stories. He spoke of the spirit of Greenwood, of the community that had built a city from scratch. a city born not of capital but of hope and resilience. He read from Samuel's notebook, his voice, once an instrument of contempt, now a vessel for a powerful truth. He read a passage about the grocer, about the generosity and selflessness that had kept a whole community from starving. He read a passage about the tailor who, with his hands, had sewn not just clothes but a sense of dignity and pride. The courtroom was silent, a hush of respect and awe. The judge, a man who had seen countless legal battles, looked at Vance and then at Samuel, sitting quietly in the back. He saw not a rich man fighting for his property, but a community fighting for its soul. The verdict was announced a week later. The judge, citing the overwhelming evidence of the community's historical and cultural significance, ruled in favor of Greenwood. The legal battle was over and they had won. Henderson was furious. He left the courtroom in a huff, his face twisted in defeat. He knew he had lost to something he couldn't fight. Vance smiled, a genuine, satisfied smile. "You're a little late," he said, echoing Samuel's words. "The city you wanted to tear down is already gone. But the one you can never touch, that one is just getting started." The city in the stories, the one built on the foundation of shared history and collective memory, had defeated the one built on ambition and greed. Vance had learned his lesson. He realized that the true source of his power was not his wealth, but the very community he had once mistreated and underestimated. The final scene took place on the steps of the Mount Zion Baptist Church. Vance, now a changed man, stood beside Samuel. He held a small, polished wooden box in his hands. "Samuel," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I was wrong about you. I was wrong about what matters. The legacy my father left me was not money, but a promise I never understood. I want you to have this." He opened the box. Inside, on a bed of velvet, was a silver shoe horn, a relic of a time when Vance had been a shoe black himself. A small, almost imperceptible inscription was carved into the silver. "The foundation is not in the brick, but in the story." Vance had not given Samuel money or property. He had given him something more valuable, an acknowledgement, a passing of the torch. Samuel, the boy who had been reduced to a shoe black, was now the heir to Greenwood's most valuable possession, its stories. The town once again was safe. The community was stronger, its foundations reinforced not with concrete, but with the power of its own history. And as for the woman, Eleanor, she returned to New York, her mission complete. She wrote a book that would change the world, a book that would be released in a few days. The title was a promise to the world, a promise Samuel would see on the front cover of a newspaper at the end of the month. The title was The Lost City of Black Wall Street, The Truth Untold. The cover showed a close-up of the silver shoe horn, its polished surface reflecting the thriving street of Greenwood. The world would finally know the story not just of a place but of the people who made it what it is. Samuel, standing tall on the steps of the church, looked at the bustling street, a street filled with a new generation. He realized that true legacy isn't something you inherit or build with wealth. It is something you protect with your heart and share with your voice. And in doing so, you can make sure that a story is never forgotten.
All right, all praises once again to the Most High for
The
that
next day,
particular story. Interesting stuff. You know, I'll tell you something that I heard from someone from that area. Um, Something that I did not make the connection on. We talk about Black Wall Street, and you're probably familiar with Rosewood from the movie and the actual place that existed in Florida. A lot of those residents from Rosewood fled to Tulsa. Those were supposedly Seminole Indians. Supposedly, I know that's not what we saw in the movie, but historically, those were supposed to be Seminole Indians. And so, what she told me was a lot of them fled to Greenwood, which is why the names are similar. They named the city after the prominent trees, the redwood in Florida, and then the greenwood in Tulsa, in Oklahoma. So um, that was an interesting connection. But they saw the same defeat where they were basically tracked and destroyed both of those cities. uh, massacred and those people uh, not taken care of. So interesting to make those connections. I didn't know that, but she was from Tulsa, and that's what she told me about that historical context, that Rosewood and Tulsa were connected, which is why they were named similar, Rosewood and Greenwood. So interesting stuff. All praises to the Most High for another video review opportunity and for another chance to learn a little bit more about our history, our heritage, and all that we have gone through. I am your Akazaki Yahoo, as always, giving all praises, honor, and great esteem. Slakia, what am I doing? Before I close us out, we do this for a specific purpose. Romans chapter 10 and verse 1. Brethren, my heart's desire and prayer to Abba for Israel is that they might be saved. We want to see our people saved. We want to see our people set free. We want to see our people restored to the prominence that the Most High have promised us. How are we going to do it? First of all, we're going to keep the faith and the belief in Hamashiach, the Messiah, and his return, and his following of the instructions of the Most High to restore Israel to prominence and put us back to where we're supposed to be. Also, Ecclesiastes chapter number 12 and verse number 13. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear the Most High and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. It is so very important to understand that in the conclusion of the whole matter, we are to fear the Most High and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. At the end of the day, when it is all said and done, all the dust is settled, and all the smoke is cleared, we will be judged on whether we have feared the Most High and kept his commandments. Why? Because this is the whole duty of man. I am your Akazaki Yahoo, giving all praises, honor, and great esteem unto the Most High Power, Yahweh, Bashem, Hamashiach, Wamalak, Yahweh Shai, and to the 12 tribes of Israel who are scattered to the four quarters of the earth. I say Shalom, Wa, Baruchim, that is peace and blessings. And I cannot wait to the day when the Most High brings us back together and we are once again 12 tribes, one family, one nation, under the Most High power, under one covenant, back in our own land with a heart of flesh and no more a heart of stone, with our enemies, our adversaries, and all those who hate us under our feet until that day come. Shalom, family. All praises to the Most High. Praise you, Abba Yah, Kwam Yasha Allah, and Barak Hashem, Yahweh.